All right, Matthew, that should be live for you to post then.
Okay, give me a second.
Okay. All right. So Erik, welcome to Social Media Strategy at the University of Delaware. We appreciate you joining us today. So we have about a third of our class that is on this Hangout. We have Ryan McGuire, who was a speaker for our first Hangout of the evening and does social media at the university, joining us. And then Matthew and I are on as Matthew does all the technical pieces, and then I'm the program director. So we're just eager to have you on board. Several people have read various parts of many of, I guess, of your books. We start our semester off with your video, Social Media Revolution, which we were so excited to see a new one that came out. So the group has a variety of questions for you, but I guess, we kind of turn it over to you if you have anything you want to say to kick things off before we maybe start firing questions your way.
Well, first, just thank you. Thank you for using the books and for using the resources, and go Blue Hens. I was fired up watching you guys in March Madness. I played basketball for Tom Izzo at Michigan State, so we had our hands full with the Blue Hens in the first round of March Madness. So anyways, I just want to thank you for using our resources, and if I can ever be of help, even beyond this call, just let me know.
Thank you. Definitely will take you up on that. So we have a ton of questions, and we'll take as much time as you will give us. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started and let Matt ask our first question.
Hey, Matt.
Uh-oh. Matt seems to maybe be having some technical difficulties, so I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next person because we're going to go through a few times. All right, so let's go to Dave.
Okay. I'm going to give you the option, two different questions. One question is about the collaborative economy, and the other one is about the Internet of Everything. Do you have a preference or a topic which you're more interested in speaking about right now?
I could probably do both, but we can start with collaborative.
Okay. Explain your take on the collaborative economy, and do you see it long-term kind of disrupting and changing the way that we do business?
No, I think the way I view it is if you look at just examples, it's the easiest thing, like B2B, or if you look at Uber, those are great examples of how we can actually use everyone's collective knowledge to get things done. And I do think it's going to change. I'm going to grab my 2.5-year-old here just real quick, otherwise she'll keep screaming. But I think it will change the way that we do things. If we look at it across the board, it just makes everything more efficient if you can go direct to direct. And so that'll be really helpful for all of us if we do it from that level. And I think Uber is a good example that it's really disruptive from the standpoint that's why it's being fought across different municipalities. If you look at Dallas or if you look at different cities, that's why they don't understand it. They're trying to fight it, but also they're fighting it over money. So if you look at Boston, a medallion for a taxi cab at Boston is $625,000 just for one taxi cab. So that's why you'll see some of the sharing or the collaborative economy being fought by older school mechanisms because there's a lot of money to be lost.
Cool. Okay. And Airbnb and Uber, they were my two examples. So all right, cool. Appreciate it.
Okay.
No, Dave, it's a great question.
Thanks, Dave. All right, now let's go to Kelly.
Hi, thank you for joining us tonight.
No, thanks for having me.
I wanted to ask you, what do you think social media's greatest contribution to our culture has been so far?
For me, it's less about technology and more about the relationships that we were able to build through these tools. And I think the biggest contribution, we haven't really seen it yet, we've seen a tip of it, is that it'll really help us with the true democratization of different countries. And so if you look at democracies, like, if you look at, actually this is something getting way ahead of ourselves, but if you look at mobile voting, that's really a social component that we'll see happen here shortly. And so that we'll see that in the next 5 to 10 years, at least in countries outside of the U.S., and then eventually it'll come into the U.S. for us to vote on our phones. And so I think that's the biggest contribution that social media is going to enable for all of us is that ability. And also if you look at like ratings and reviews, that in time all products and services will have a rating on them. And so also people are starting to have ratings as well. And so if we look at that, that's going to be a huge piece when we look at word of mouth. It's been so important for all businesses historically the last hundreds of years. But now we look at word of mouth on digital steroids. So again, we're kind of just at the beginning of all products and services having a rating on them. You're starting to see it that mattresses have ratings, that people are having ratings with LinkedIn, with endorsements and recommendations. So that's where we're really going to see things change.
Thank you.
All right, Matt, are you okay to jump in and ask one of your questions so we don't bypass you?
She's talking to you.
I don't have the.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to Matt. I'll hit him up the next time. My apologies. All right. So let's keep going in the order that we have. Michael, you're up next.
Erik, thank you for being with us. I'll echo my colleagues' sentiments. In reading your website and reviewing your website, you've been keynote speaker to a number of companies and corporations, Nokia, Sony, Coach. Each of those companies, and you have really adopted your social media perspective, because some of them have had mixed results. Not that you're going to be the end-all and be-all from a translation from a keynote speaker to translating into earnings per share, but in those companies, which ones are doing it, are taking your message to heart, and what are they doing to take your message and move their company or their employees forward?
Yeah, I think some of them, if you look at them, some of them aren't really well known. But if you look at like John Barbados in the fashion industry, what they're doing is they're just leveraging what they do traditionally. So sometimes they will just grab a well-known band like Kiss, and they will have that band put on a concert at a 200-person venue. And now they're just layering in the social tools to where it's a surprise to the people in the audience. They know there's a band coming, but they have no expectation that it's going to be Kiss. And all of a sudden Kiss shows up, and they've got all those social tools there to really blow it out. Also in the fashion industry, if you look at All Saints, because when you look at social and mobile, they go hand in hand. They're not emerging, they're merging technologies. And so if you look at a fashion company like All Saints, they just redid their entire website with mobile first in mind. And so they did mobile first HTML5, not to get in the weeds on the technical nerdy stuff, but that they actually did that all in-house. They were able to get that developed within a month, their HTML5 mobile site, and thinking mobile first. And that's a huge difference to think mobile first, because what it allows you to, makes you do is reduce the amount of items that you have up there. It's actually a good thing to do, because in the end, you're going to win as a company. You're going to sell more by having less up there. But when you think about some of these big companies that have so many different players, to say your tab is no longer going to be on the site is very political. And so, but the companies realize it gets them to their 80-20 rule real quick. It's kind of, it's a different thing they weren't expecting when they're going mobile first for the consumer. But then all of a sudden it's great for their business because it forces them into that 80-20 mindset. And then some of the examples that you're probably familiar with is the companies like HubSpot. They just produce what's called inbound marketing. That's what their book is called, Inbound. And so they're providing valuable content, and the people are coming into their site to get that content for free. And then, oh, by the way, over time, they might become a customer. So it's a different way to think about marketing, and I think HubSpot's one of the leaders in that. If you ever read Tony Hsieh's book from Zappos, Delivering Happiness, everyone uses Zappos as an example, but they don't really dig into the weeds on why what was so radical that he did, is he took money out of the marketing department, out of his marketing budget. So instead of having $60 million in marketing, he ported that over into customer service, which doesn't usually have big budgets, and that goes a long way in customer service. So it allows them, the customer service agent, to have more power, so that if they can resolve a customer's issue for under $100 or less, they don't have to ask their manager. They can just do it. So it's all about empowerment and trust.
Empower them. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, empower them. So I think those are some good examples of companies out there that are really doing it well.
Just to follow up, Erik, well, I work in healthcare and for a couple big pharmaceutical companies, and it's funny you say mobile, because we've been preaching that to them. When we design emails now, we make it mobile friendly, because the research commissioned by them showed that 51%, the tipping points just occurred, 51% of doctors read their emails on this thing now. And versus, so when you're writing the character on a subject line, it's got to be 25 versus 65 characters. But my follow-up question is, for our team, are you noticing this paradigm shift being done by early adoption by smaller companies? Because you mentioned companies we wouldn't hear about. Is it easier for smaller, mid-sized companies to adopt the social media, mobile media, than it is DuPont, the top Fortune 20 companies?
Yeah, I mean, so in some ways it is. In other ways, they all run their different challenges. And so if you run into a smaller company, their thing is, why is anyone talking about us? And then a big company is like, too many people are talking about us. How do we staff up for this and get after it? And so I didn't mention some big companies, but some big companies out there that are doing well are Ford Motor Company. And Scott Money leads the charge there. Alan Mullally's not necessarily a digital leader, but he's such a strong leader. I know he's stepping down now from Ford, but what he was able to do with Ford is hire someone like Scott from the outside world to come into Detroit and actually make things happen. And they're most famous for doing the Ford Fiesta launch, where they gave the car to 100 different bloggers.
Yes.
And with those 100 bloggers, they were able to promote it. And that took a lot of risk on their part for Ford to do that. Burberry is another one that's kind of out there, and their CEO actually just left, not just left, but she left to go to work at Apple. But they had a lot of success in the social world doing that. In the company I mentioned, the All Saints, he actually came from Burberry. He's now their CEO, William. So you can kind of sometimes see the tree and the lineage of these people that get out there and really get after it. Oreo's another big company that you might hear of. What they do a really good job of is what's called momentum marketing. So taking advantage of something that's much bigger than yourself. So when an event like the royal wedding happens, it's how do you ride the wave what's already being talked about? Or if something comes up out of nowhere like Tiger Blood, a mention of Tiger Blood by Charlie Sheen, and all of a sudden, if you're a person that sells Bloody Mary mix or you're a local restaurant, how do you take advantage of that new term that's in the lexicon? And if you look at the data, 20% of all searches on Google are new every day. And so it's kind of mind-blowing. But if you can keep abreast of what's hot and now and ride the momentum, then you can have a tremendous amount of success. And that's part of what BuzzFeed is up to and what they're doing really well, is that they're just kind of everything's going on here. Sorry about that.
Yes.
I mean, it's like Armageddon here. Sorry about that. I've got my 2-year-old under control, and then all of a sudden everything starts going crazy over here. But I apologize for that.
I don't want to monopolize my colleagues' time. Thank you very much, Eric, for your insight.
No, thank you so much. And then feel free to follow up with me. I'm actually speaking with United Healthcare in a couple of weeks. They're starting to get into it. The healthcare industry is trying to figure it out.
Great.
Okay.
Good to know. All right, now let's go to Kristen. You're up. Oh, did she just drop off, it looks like? Oh,
I think she dropped off, Meredith.
All right, well, Michelle, it's your turn then.
Excellent. Good timing with your 2-year-old, Eric. My question has to do with the fact that 92% of 2-year-olds have a digital shadow. What are the implications for privacy issues now and in the future?
No, I think it's huge. I mean, that's what my 2014 book is called, What Happens in Vegas Stays on YouTube, and Privacy is Dead, The Rules of Reputation. But I think it's a huge paradigm shift for all of us, whether we're parents or not. Is for parents, you have to make the decision. Are you the one that's going to actually make the digital stamp or the digital shadow for your kid, or do you want to leave it up to them? And so that's kind of a big shift for parents, but also for individuals and companies is, how do you behave in a world where there is no privacy, and how to make sure you protect yourself, but also you can use it to produce. And so the book's not just about protect, don't do this, don't do that. It's also about the production side, that you can actually have a huge positive impact on the world now, much greater than ever before, because you can actually have someone that's down in Colombia that's fighting against the guerrilla warfare down there and get 17 million people globally to stand up on the same day and say, we're not going to take it anymore, and have a huge impact on that society. And so there's a lot of great things we can do, but there's also stuff we have to be aware of that we've never had to worry about before.
Good point. Thank you.
Whole new ball game. So I'm going to give Chris, I'm going to give you a second to kind of catch your breath if you're okay, and I'm going to let Ryan ask a question. So we'll do Ryan, Chris, and then we'll take it back to Matt and start at the top again. All right?
Okay.
I'm back. Sorry about that. Sorry, I'm back.
No, it's all right.
Crazy here, but I'm back. Sorry.
No, craziness is better than technical difficulties that we've had some issues with tonight on our end. So I'm going to let Ryan go ahead and ask a question.
Hi, Eric. It's nice to meet you.
Hey, Ryan.
I work with Meredith at the University of Delaware. We both handle social media there. In the previous
I love
Hangout...
your work. I love the global piece of your work. It's great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, that's what I was going to
It's an honor to be here with everybody, so I really appreciate everyone's time and everyone's work. So feel free again. I'll give out my mobile, but call me anytime after this as well.
I'm sure you'll be hearing from us. I'm sure. So, speaking of global, like I was saying, in the last Hangout, I talked about kind of our international efforts. I was wondering what you thought. As I found through research, I mean, it's very easy to think not internationally. I mean, I think when we think of social media, it's very easy for us to just think Facebook, Twitter, and think of that as global. But really, it's not. As we found out, there's in China, those platforms aren't allowed. And there's WeChat, there's Weibo, there's RenRen, and there are platforms in different countries, different languages that we don't think about. I was wondering if you thought that there would ever be any one social platform that is truly global, or do you think it's more likely that there's going to be more diversification?
I think a little of both. So I think that the granddaddy of them all, that's why Google Plus, if you look at their technology, that's why Guy Kawasaki, Chris Rogan, they get all excited about Google Plus because they're saying, okay, this is kind of tying everything together. But that being said, I'm not saying that Google Plus will be the winner because beta, if you looked at beta and VHS, the beta was better technology, but the VHS is way back in the day won out just because it had the networking effect. And so there should probably always be a big dominant player just because of that networking effect. That being said, we can already start to see things that parse out quickly that are kind of niche, whether that's an Instagram. If you look at that, it's kind of like this niche thing. The thing gets gobbled up by the big consolidation. So you'll see a little bit of both. The innovation will be in these little niche markets, and the big people will always grab it, and then start to consolidate across the board. And that's why you saw Facebook was a good example like 5 years ago. It was very easy to see that wave happening because there was like Orchid down in Brazil, there was Hi-Fi across several countries, like India was big, and Bebo was big in the United Kingdom. But you could see that wave of Facebook was going to wash them out. And now you can kind of see the same thing. Like if you're in Germany, their main business networking tool is Zing. But when I'm in Germany, I tell them, look, just get on LinkedIn because it's coming. Like LinkedIn is coming. And the good thing about LinkedIn, I'm not saying go buy their stock, but is if you look at LinkedIn, they're the one tool that's really not blocked in China to date. And so it's very fascinating to see if that still remains the case moving forward. But yeah, no, it's a great question. I think there'll always be the big player because of the networking effect, but there's also going to be these little niches. And also on the ratings, what's interesting is Yelp is going to be one of the, there's not going to be, I thought maybe there's this one rating site where you go for all ratings, but that looks like it's going to be bifurcated, whether it's Amazon for different books, whether it's Wayfair for mattresses, TripAdvisor for travel. It looks like those are going to have their just different verticals.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great insight with that. And I know we try to embrace as many platforms as possible in our class kind of for some of those reasons of just not knowing, what's going to be here in the next, year or two, but learning that, there are ways that it can translate from one platform to the next. It's great. So I'm going to go back to Kristen at this point since she's back on the call.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Hi,
Eric. So I'm wondering, how do you see websites playing into social media marketing? So is it equal parts pushing traffic to the websites and pushing websites to the social media, or are we just pushing all of our website content, what previously would have been our website content, onto social media now?
Yeah, I think it's going to still be, if you look back, I always like to look at history because it's kind of the same movie, different players sometimes. is if you look back when AOL was big, people were always sending, hey, here's the AOL key terms. And then from there, like Yahoo, they're like, here, go to Yahoo, this Yahoo page. Is it in time really you want to have at your core your main site? Keep it there, because these tools are always going to change. Don't follow the tools, follow the trends, and don't invest in the tools, invest in your consumer. So it's key for us all to realize that. And this movie's played itself out before 2 decades ago, and it keeps repeating itself. And so it's key for us to see that, that we don't know if. We know it's not a question of if, it's a question of when Facebook goes away, when Twitter goes away. But social's here to stay. If you look back at e-commerce, pets.com went away, but e-commerce didn't go away. So that's why I always say follow the trend, don't look at the tools.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Great insight there. Thanks for that. Really appreciate it. All right, let's see if Matt's worked through all those technical problems and if we can have him ask a question.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for joining us. Sorry for the difficulties. I think I have probably 4 or 5 laptops open in front of me right now.
And Eric, let me tell you, so we have a husband and wife combo in our class, so hence we have Kelly and Matt.
I like it. It's funny night. Yeah. I got my 2-year-old and my TV decides to go crazy, but I think we got things under control on this end, so we're all good.
Good. Well, thanks. The question from our group was, what do you think is the best way for small businesses and nonprofits to use social media as a marketing vehicle to increase their profits, community awareness, and/or engagement?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, that last term, engagement. And so sometimes when I show small business audiences, I get up there and show that, look, I'm a small business owner. You know, I give keynotes, that's my business, or I also develop videos for Fortune 500 companies, but I'm still a small business that's out there. So I have to eat my own dog food. I have to use these tools that I say that are great. First of all, I tell them don't boil the ocean. You know, pick a couple tools that you're comfortable with, that you have fun with, and that your user's using, and go with those. And do as best you can on those. Don't think you have to be on every tool. For me, the best tools that work best for me are YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. It could be that for some other small business, that their best tools are Instagram and Vine. So just figure out what's best for your business. But once you get into it, a lot of it just gets down to hard work. And so it's really looking for those key terms: listening, interacting, reacting. Listen, interact, react. And so what I do is I'm looking for a term like socialnomics, the name of the book, or maybe the name of the video, Social Media Revolution. All of a sudden I see someone that, this might have been how this call was set up even. I might have been trolling for schools that use the book, or you guys proactively reached out to me and I was able to reach back out to you. I think that's how it worked, that Meredith was out there working super hard and we were able to connect on that level. But someone might post, hey, I really like this video, and then I'll reply back and go, glad you liked the video, here's more stats in this book if you need them. And so I'm providing value. They reply back, say they bought the book, so there's your sale, and then I've got that engaged customer, so the next time I do something, I can reach back out to them with something of value. And what I always tell people is I go, what I just talked about, if you're sitting there as a small business, you're going, oh my gosh, that's a lot of work. It is. The good thing about hard work, keeps the competition out. So the short answer to that is just make sure that you're there when your customers need you, and don't always chase after the negative reviews. Make sure you pay attention to some of your best customers. A lot of us make the mistake of chasing after the negative review, and that might not be your best customer. Your best customer might have just told you you're doing something wonderful. So try to figure out how you can do more of that to please other customers.
Great, thank you.
Excellent insight there. All right, I'm going to go back around for one more round of questions, if that's okay with you, Eric.
No, this is great. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we will go next to Dave. Round 2.
Hey, Eric. So the other thing that I was, we talked about collaborative economy. I wanted to get your take on the Internet of Everything. Is it definitely happening? And what is that going to mean for not only businesses but consumers, and how we're connected and how we make purchasing decisions and do business? And
just to clarify, just so I make sure that we're on the same page, Internet of Everything is that you can buy anything on the internet?
Well, no, I think the Internet of Everything is the concept that more and more we're becoming more connected using like mobile devices and these social networks, but that more and more things will become connected to the internet, and there's going to be more data, and really that whole concept of like that your thermostat is connected,
Yep.
that your house is connected, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I see that it's just that's going to be more and more, so that you're paying. If you've got to pay for your meter, instead of putting the piece of paper in your windshield, it's just you just type in your phone number with the license plate, and then it reminds you, hey, you've got 2 minutes left on that. Do you want to renew it? Yep. Boom. All done. Or when you look at just the explosion of mobile banking, I was just in front of a lot of credit unions. And so they're trying to keep up with the tools so that you can scan your check very easily. It's funny that the U.S. still uses checks because a lot of the rest of the world doesn't. But yeah, and we talked about Uber. That's where it kind of dovetails. Is one of the things that Uber is starting to break down as well. Is it gets people to start thinking, yes, of course my phone should be my commerce engine. I shouldn't have to exchange money. Of course, it should just be tied to my phone. And so then that gets us caught up with what Korea's been doing for several years. But it takes something like that that's kind of that first soft baby step, because it still has a credit card on the back end. And not to get completely into the weeds here, but that's what Walmart wants to get rid of the credit card companies, mainly because of the data. They want to own the data. And they also want to get rid of that 3% charge they're getting.
Sure.
That's minor to the data. They want to know what's being purchased, when, and where. And they want to get the credit card out of there. And so that's why you see Apple might become the credit card. That's why you see Starbucks might become like just a direct payment between you and Starbucks rather than having this credit card mechanism. And so that's massive. And that's billions and trillions of dollars that obviously the financial institutions and the credit card processors are really scared about. So it'll be interesting to see that one play out as well.
Cool. Well, I'm ready to ditch my credit card. So.
There you go. It's just, go ahead and cut it up at this point, Dave. It's coming. All right, Kelly, we'll go to you next.
Okay. I'm interested in learning in what ways you think social media is making us smarter as a culture.
Yeah, I mean, in some instances, it is making us dumber as well. So I always like to say it's kind of, you got to play both sides. I think net it's definitely a positive thing. And not to get way out there, but essentially a lot of you guys on the call probably have already kind of come to this conclusion that social media is kind of everything. It's like this encompassing thing that we've kind of said social media, but really we're all social. It touches every part of the business, and it touches kind of every facet of society. So I think in time people start to realize it's not just this bucket, it's actually kind of this connecting piece. And that's kind of what Zuckerberg's talking about, where he wants to be more of just a platform. So it's just, and getting back to Ryan's question, that's why Zuckerberg's trying to get that for Facebook. It's just more of a platform rather than a destination to kind of connects everything out there. But I think one way it's making us smarter is just the collaborative piece. You guys see it more firsthand, but whether I'm going to high schools or whether it's universities, is just the ability for peer-to-peer to share that kind of information, and also faculty, educator to student, also educator to educator. And so it's a fascinating world in which we live in. If you look at like khanacademy.org, something like that's just unbelievable for the high school market. And then you look at edx.org, which you guys might be familiar with it on the call, but that's the Harvard MIT initiative, to where now they have, I think, over 50 universities that are allowing their content to be free out there. And what they found out, just as like we could know intuitively on this call, is that it's blended. It has to be blended learning. It's not that everyone's going to go to edX and then the whole system just changes. No, it's just another tool, and it's a blended learning model, and that's what they found is now it allows the professor to actually spend more time individually teaching in the classroom rather than lecturing. Now, with a change like that, people resist change because we're human beings, is that might take a while for that to occur, but that's why edx.org is going to be so powerful and popular.
That's great. Thank you.
And Eric, I'm glad you brought up about the edX movement in particular, because that's kind of, I think, what we're trying with this program to do in a lot of ways, of figure out how can we put a case study together. So we take on a client for the semester, a nonprofit in the community. We help them figure out their social strategy, and then we use some prepackaged materials that are already out there online. We do the innovation of hangouts like this, and then we have the standard lectures and so forth. So if you ever find any great resources, we would love to piggyback those into future semesters of this program.
Oh, great. Just as a real quick data point for edX, that you guys might know this, but they're trying to build out the platform, the learning platform, because they know every company and university is going to need to do some sort of online collaborative. Mm-hmm. So that's why Stanford's joined this, and so is Google. So it's MIT, Harvard, Stanford, and Google that are programming basically open source educational tool. And so it's just something to keep an eye on if you're going to launch that at Delaware. If you don't already have a long contract, just try to check that out because it might be cheaper. They're going to charge you for the services, obviously, if you have issues trying to get it set up, just like the Linux model. But it is open source, and that's what they're doing.
Very cool. Thanks. All right. Well, I don't want to take up more time. I want to let the students get back to their questions. So we're going to go to Michael again.
I must have had a control. I don't know if you can see me or not, but I have a question.
I can see
Eric,
you.
Okay, great. Poor guy.
Yeah, you're looking sharp. Good looking man.
Stop it. Thank you. What do you do when your personal reputation and integrity are put at risk by an organization or company that you're working for? Have you ever encountered that? And then how do you handle that? Or I
haven't encountered it personally myself, but I have had some friends that have reached out to me, and I mean, my advice to them was, you're going to go down with the ship. And I give them the Joe Paterno example because, ironically enough, was a huge Joe Paterno fan, and so I wrote about him in Digital Leader, saying he adapted to change over several decades to stay on top of the game. But then right when I was going to go to press, when the news broke, and no one knew if it was going to be true or not. It's just like the news broke, and I had to call the publisher and say, you cannot let that go to press. And they go, it's already gone. I go, well, then take my name off it because I don't know what's going to happen. We just had a paragraph that said, we'll find out in the next couple weeks what happens, but if Paterno surrounded himself with the wrong people, then it's going to affect his legacy immediately and forever. And so that's when buddies call me. I say, look, you got yourself with the right people both online and offline as an institution as well. You got to look real hard. One, go face it and see if they're going to change. If they're not, then you got to make the hard decision if it's worth staying with them. It's more times than not, it's not worth it, so you got to get out of there, especially in this digital age where everything's recorded.
Okay, thank you.
Great. As this hangout will live on for forever until it comes off the internet, I guess. It's a great example. All right, Chris, let's go back to you again.
Okay, thank you. What are your thoughts on Instagram as a social media marketing tool? So it lacks a lot of the abilities of the other tools we like to use, direct links and analytics and that type of thing. But it has a huge and growing and younger audience. So do the benefits sort of outweigh the hassle?
I do, and I think I'm always a guy that's just like hop on there and test it out, see if it works for your company, and a lot of these tools are getting fairly light, which is good, whether it's Pinterest or whether it's Instagram. And so like if you look at Pinterest, it drives more traffic to company sites than Twitter does, but Twitter gets all the buzz, no pun intended, by the media outlets because they use it a lot more. But yeah, whether it's Instagram or Pinterest, it's a very light investment, so get out there and use it and figure out if it works or not. And I always tell people that if you look at like the immediate return on investment, that you're doing yourself a huge disservice when it comes to social. Is that anyone, and kind of going back to the old analogy of what happened historically, if you look at Google when it first came out, everyone did paid search because it's a no-brainer. You pay for it, you see if someone clicked on it, did they fill out a lead form, did they buy something? So everyone did that. That doesn't take any brains. But the great companies, they said, what about the organic search? Oh, I don't even know what metadata is, or what a hyperlink is, but if that means we're going to show up high in Google's organic, natural listings, and that's where 70% of the clicks are, I'll invest for 1 or 2 years in that, and knowing I might not get a return. And those companies that did that made millions and millions of dollars when their terms started to show up high in the free listings of Google. So again, I think it's a great question on Instagram. It's a light investment. Go out there, test it. If you're having success with it, make it happen, and understand that don't always go to these tried and true has to be this metric, because if it always worked to that metric, we wouldn't have people working at these companies. It'd just be robots, because they could buy it and figure out if it's producing a return on investment. So I always say make sure you're aware of your return on investment, but don't become a slave to it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Eric. You totally just in a succinct sentence underlined our entire class we had on the value of measures. So thank you for that. 3 hours of work down the drain, one sentence.
No, I saved it at the end. I said you should be aware of your return on investment. Just don't make it the end-all, be-all.
That's great.
It needs to be both. The world's a balance.
Yeah, there you do. Got to keep that human element. All right, Michelle, coming to you next.
Well, it's stated that the word of mouth is on digital steroids, and in various political uprisings around the world, governments work to shut down social media as a form of immediate control. Do you see this as an increasingly common way to handle dissent?
You know, it's funny because we see it also within companies that they sometimes shut down things they don't understand. It's like that's the solution. And sometimes that's the right thing to do until you get a grip on what's happening, but you need to quickly figure out what's happening. So if you looked, 75% of companies used to block Google at the workplace because they figured, why would you be using Google at work? It's kind of a time waster. And that seems laughable today, but that's 75% used to block it. And then up to 3 years ago, 54% of companies block social media. And so sometimes if you are working with a company and they do that, you can go, you give an example of Turkey's blocked off all of access to social Twitter, and they're like, that's ridiculous. And they're like, well, you're doing the same thing to your employees. Oh, that's different. Well, no, it's not. It's really the same. It's the same thing, just in a different level, degrees.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you'll still see governments try to do that. It's not very effective because what happens is it shines even a bigger spotlight on it. So then other people from around the world get involved to help tunnel around it. So that's what you see with like Google will help tunnel around it. So it actually heightens the problem sometimes for these governments. And so it'll be interesting. So I don't think it's going to go away. I think you'll continue to see governments try to shut stuff down as much as they can, but it's going to become very, very, very hard to do in the future, just even more and more difficult to do that.
Thank you.
Eric, so before I go to Ryan for a question, actually one of the pieces from Socialnomics that always resonated with me was when you talked about the Footloose example, but when the point that social media actually makes you more productive in the workplace. Can you talk maybe a little bit about that for some folks here who might have to go back to their employers soon and say, yes, we need to do social media? It's the right thing?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, if you look at it, some of the data shows out that it's more productive for a person during their break to use their time to look up something on Wikipedia than it is for them to go on a smoking break. So they've done some studies that showcase that you should allow your employees to have some freedom. It's going to make them more productive. But one of the main reasons it's going to make you more productive is that instead of looking for items, they're all going to be pushed your way by your peers and friends that you trust. And so you no longer look for the news or look for items. They actually should be pushed your way. If you've got the right network set up and also the right tools set up, that's how it can make you much more productive than it ever has been before. But again, a lot of that sometimes learned. That's why we wrote the other book, Digital Leader, just to showcase how you can be more efficient with your day and make the tools work for you, don't work for the tools.
Okay. All right. And now I will let Ryan go ahead and ask his second question.
All right. Thank you, Meredith. Hi again, Eric.
Hello.
So I went global with my last question. I'm going to bring it very local. Might be just as complicated though. So we're working on where we talk about kind of creating a virtual tour at the University of Delaware. What we have in mind is kind of like something I don't think has been seen before. I mean, what we are talking about, it would involve social, it would involve virtual, it would be very visual. I was wondering if you've ever used or come across anything that you find especially helpful in conveying an experience rather than news. I know we use social media to put out news a lot, but what do you find is best for conveying experience? So we might be able to consider this for conveying to people all around the world the experience that you get at UD.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that you might know this better than I do, but if you talk to your current students, a lot of times when you ask them what made you come to Delaware, and it's, well, I connected with the professor, or I connected with, two of my older siblings went there, or a neighbor went there, and so I was able to understand through their experience what it was like. And I liked the experience they were having, so I was able to do it. And so when you talk about the virtual piece, you should definitely, I can connect you with the folks if you haven't already, connect at LinkedIn, because they're investing a lot of money in that area, and that's why they've dropped the age limit to 13 years old, is because they're allowing each university to have their place on LinkedIn primarily so that they can get that experience. And so what you can do is augment what you're building and make sure that it's porting in and you're connected with LinkedIn. And since they're beta testing a lot of this stuff, you can have like some pretty good access in LinkedIn at their educational team, and those guys are great. And I'm happy to connect whoever the right person is at Delaware with those folks. But then you can go along with the ride with them, because you'll show them stuff that they might not have seen, and then they'll show you stuff you haven't seen, and then collectively you can really have that experience that you're looking for. But it allows people to access people that are current students, current educators, current professors, as well as alumni, so that they can actually get a real sense to what that experience can be like.
That's great. That's news to me. Or we hadn't thought of LinkedIn or integrating that way. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. No, just one quick data point with Michigan State. Michigan State is the largest alumni association in the world, or in the U.S. And what they did is, through a LinkedIn beta test, is they allowed for the sharing of the information between their alumni database and what LinkedIn had. And so LinkedIn, everyone updates their LinkedIn, but a lot of us don't update our alumni when we get that information, like, I don't have time to do that. And so LinkedIn sent a note out to the alumni. They increased their database more in one day than they had in the last 3 years, just from that one email that LinkedIn was able to send out.
Wow.
So that's a great point, and I think that translates to some of the strategies some people in this class have been thinking about of how can they use LinkedIn, whether for our client this semester or else when they go back to their workplace. So great ideas there with that. So we will, I guess for our last question, go back to Matt. Let him ask one more. So Matt, it's all you. Looks like Matt and Kelly are both muted, so I just might want to fix that.
There we are. Can you hear us?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
All right, here. Our question is, social media marketing is growing exponentially. What's the one thing in your mind that could derail its growth?
Privacy. People getting concerned about privacy. And I'll give you, actually, I can never just answer one. The other thing is just the human beings, like the mojo. And so if people think that it sort of becomes lame, which at time they might, so that in my mind it might go more like email, just it won't be this uber hype thing. Like I mentioned before, social kind of touches everything. So eventually people will realize this touches every piece. But yeah, I think you might start to see is that, oh, Twitter's stock's down 50%. Should I even still be tweeting? And so that might have a little bit of derailment as well. But the main thing will be just people's concern about privacy. But again, I think people in time will realize, unfortunately, we didn't ask this, but it's just going to be gone. Because if Google can develop a contact lens that records everything and it's cheap, then, I mean, they already have the technology, then it's just that's where it's going, which has a lot of positives. It'll decrease like kidnapping a lot. It'll decrease like the human drug trafficking, but obviously with the loss of privacy, there's a lot of negative things as well. But that's super long answer, but privacy.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's actually a good point. So next week we have an attorney coming into class, and I'm sure she's going to talk a lot about privacy and the legality of it. So excellent note to end on. Erik, do you have any parting knowledge for us? Anything that didn't come up that we should absolutely know, or our other classmates watching should take away from all the knowledge you have?
No, I just want to say thank you so much, and this has been a great, very well organized. I do this a fair amount in the universities, and it was very, very organized, so I really appreciate that. And I apologize for the technical glitches on my end with my daughter at the beginning, but I just want to say thanks for all the support. If I can help you in any way, please let me know. The last piece of advice that I would just leave, not advice, but just something to be on the lookout for is that mobile voting piece, and we're going to start to do mobile voting, which would be great for democracy. And so that's coming to a theater near you. And also just remember that in time, everything will have a rating on it, every product and service, and also people are going to have ratings on it. As scary as that might sound, that's why it's important for all of us to produce as best a digital stamp as we can, whether it's for a business or for us as an individual, because we can actually use it to inspire others. I just want to thank everybody again. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Erik. We appreciate it. All right.
Go Blue Hens. Fighting Blue Hens. Ciao.
See ya.